So, as I was saying earlier, last week actually, how many of you were here last week? Okay, so those of you that were here last week will remember that we started last week with the story of the prodigal son. And the story of the prodigal son is one of the greatest teachings out of the scriptures. In my opinion, it's the most clear teaching by Jesus of how to have a relationship with God. Last week, if you remember, this is part 2 today. Last week, I left the story hanging, so I'm going to go back and give you a 1-minute recap for those of you that weren't here. The story of the prodigal son is there was 2 sons that lived with a father on the farm. The one son, younger son, I assume, comes to the father, says, "Dad, I'd like my inheritance. I'd like it now. I'm going to get out of here." Dad didn't argue. He just gave him the inheritance, and the son goes to a place called the far country and spends all of his money, and then a famine hits, and he runs out of money, and he's mucking the pigsties and eating pig food, which is, for a nice Jewish boy, is not a good thing. Jesus was making a very clear story. The metaphor, the idiom of this parable is that it's possible for us to separate ourselves from God. The father, of course, is symbolic of the God. And the son said, "I'm going to go back and make peace with my dad," and asked to come back in the good graces of Dad. He comes down the road, Dad sees him, throws his arms around him, and says, my son who was dead has come back to life. Let's party down. Let's kill the fatted cow. Let's have put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet and the best seamless robe. All these things, metaphors and idioms for the highest expression of royalty and love. Okay? And so they're inside partying down, and the father's so glad that his son came home. Son number 2 is out on the field, and he comes up. He hears all this ruckus going on inside, and he comes up to one of the servants. He says, "What's going on in there? I hear all this noise." And the servant said, "Well, your brother who had left and gone to the far country has decided to come back, and your father is celebrating and throwing the big party for him and giving him all these beautiful things." And so the son throws a temper tantrum. He says, "That's not fair." And the father comes out and says, "Son, what's going on?" And the son says, "Dad, that's not fair. You give him all his money, and he goes and leaves and spends it all, and you come back and you welcome back into your good graces. You've never even given me, not to mention a fatted calf, you never even given me a kid to party down with my friends." So he's going on and on with how unhappy he is that his brother was welcomed back into the good graces of the father after he had spent his inheritance. So this is where we ended it last week. The father walks up to the son and puts his arm around the son's shoulders. And I can imagine him standing on the bluff overlooking the farm. And he says, "Son, do you see all this? This is yours. And it's always been yours. It's always been yours." And thus the parable, the missing part that I don't think a lot of people focus on in this parable, is that the stay-at-home son, remember I said each of the sons represents something to us. Jesus was a master at teaching metaphor and idioms. The first son, Jesus' entire teaching boils down to 2 things, in my opinion. The first thing is, the Father and I are one. The kingdom of heaven is within you. That's the first thing, okay? And he was speaking for all of us, not just himself. The second thing is, it is done unto you as you believe. Not as you think or wish or hope, but as you believe. Get that? So each of these sons represents one of those aspects. The prodigal son represents that aspect of coming back home, coming back into alignment with the one. The Father and I are one. The second son represents, now this is another aspect of our being, the son who has all of the good right in front of him all the time and doesn't see it. I sound like a Baptist for a minute, sorry. Hallelujah. No, don't, let's not do that again. And the point is that the son, the stay-at-home son, was so busy out in the field doing, that he never took time to stop, look at all this, and say, "Wow, I'm one with my father. This is all mine." Okay? I call this the second son syndrome. Now here's the good news and the other news. We all have, the parables are about us. We're each of the sons in this story. Sons or daughters, however you want to look at it. Okay? we have that aspect of us that's capable of separating ourselves from God. You can't separate yourself literally from the presence of God because God's omnipresent, but you can separate yourself in your own belief system about it. Or we can be right in the midst of the good that is laid upon us, our divine inheritance. We have to go beyond gratitude, which I'm going to talk about, to experience and claim our divine inheritance. We are the embodiment of both of those sons. We are the embodiment of both of those sons. I have a great quote to kind of see if you can find a place in you where you agree with, and you're courageous enough to see that you have some aspects of the stay-at-home son who is so oblivious, so blind to what's the goods that's in front of him that you don't see it, and therefore it's not yours. This is an expanded quote of what's up there. The more often we see the things around us, even the beautiful and wonderful things, the more they become invisible to us. That is why we often take for granted the beauty of this world, the flowers, the trees, the birds, the clouds, even those we love. Because we see things so often, we see them less and less. We see things so often, we see them less and less. And the universe knows one word. You know what it is? Yes. It affirms whatever our deepest beliefs are. In the stay-at-home son, his belief was he was so busy doing, he never looked up to appreciate the gift and to accept it and say, this is mine. So he was busy in resentment and anger towards his brother. And what does the universe say? Yes, you want to experience separation? I'll help you continue to experience that you don't have enough. So the reality is, I got another good quote for you. When we go beyond gratitude, how many of you believe that you live with gratitude? 7, 8, 9 of you. Okay, good. This is a shocking statement from a minister. Gratitude is not enough. Sorry. You know, at Thanksgiving, how we stand around the table and we hold hands and we each declare something we're grateful for. And we go through about this 2-week period during the holidays where we're really working on what we're grateful for in our lives. Can I get a witness for that? And about 2 weeks after the holidays are over, we go back into that unconscious state of the stay-at-home son, and we get back into the doing, and we forget to focus on the gifts that lie right in front of us all the time. But here's the key. When we can go beyond gratitude and enter into the awareness of what we take for granted, gratitude flows from within and is a realization that comes without your effort. In other words, we're broadening a mindfulness practice from focusing on the finite things that we may be grateful for in our lives to an awareness of all the things we take for granted. And they are legion. As an example, I got another quote for you. First thing I'm going to ask you this question. How many of you are grateful for the non-toothache that you have right now? Thich Nhat Hanh, my favorite Buddhist monk, writes, when you have a toothache, you call your dentist and you ask for an emergency appointment to relieve your pain. You know deeply that at the point of not having a toothache, that's happiness. Yet later, when you don't have a toothache, you forget it and you do not treasure your non-toothache. When was the last time you thought about how much you maybe take your teeth for granted? I sat this morning at breakfast and I made a list and I titled it, I can't speak for you, this is my list, okay? You have to make your own list up. And I'm going to only share a few of them. Things that I take for granted. And this talk is for me as much as it is for you. Huh? I told you last week, man, I've been in the far country for the last 9 months. And I've just come back. I've come back into the awareness and the ability to practice the presence of God in my daily life again. And so many things can take us away from that truth. But things I'm grateful for in this moment. Everybody take a nice deep breath and hold that breath. I'm going to show you how much you take your breath for granted. Don't let it go yet. Okay, now release it. And as you release it, think about how grateful you are for the breath that is yet to follow. Yeah, the one you took for granted. Now that's just an extreme example, isn't it? But my point is, we take the smallest things, most finite and minute things, for granted. And that's just an illustration to point that out. Here's a few other, as I said this a number of times, the very first thing we do when we come to the planet is we breathe in. And the last thing we do when we leave the planet is we breathe out. And it's those breaths in between those 2 points that we go unconscious and we forget about, because our breath brings us to the present moment. And that is my mission on this planet, is to bring people into the awareness that this moment is it. This moment is all you got. Be present with it and be blessed by it and in it. How many of you took a shower this morning? When you stepped into the shower, did you take the warm water for granted? You just turn it on there. As a matter of fact, you take the water for granted? When you shampooed your hair, did you take the shampoo for granted? When you shampooed your hair, did you take your hair for granted? What a blessing it is to have hair. Can I have a witness? But we don't think about it until we're brought to task to think about it. Okay? Until something shows up in our life. The truth is we don't realize how much we take for granted until that which we take for granted is taken away from us. Your body. There's another one. We take our bodies for granted. We take our legs for granted. Do you realize without your toes, you'd fall over? We take our heart for granted. How about this one? We take our liver for granted. Our liver! When was the last time you thanked your liver for doing the amazing job it's been doing nonstop from the day you were born to purify your blood and help you digest your food? Maybe some of us need to do a little apologizing to our liver. I'm sorry, man, for all those years in college. I treated you pretty bad. Here's my point, though. Okay, when we remember that we hold anything with gratitude, when we become aware of what we take for granted, we instantly bestow gratitude in that which we are aware we're taking for granted. And when we rise to a sense of conscious, intentional gratitude, that which we are thankful for receives the blessing of it, the energy of it. So when you give thanks and you bless your heart, bless your liver, bless your feet, bless your neck, bless your brain, bless your hair, these are living, breathing things, and they receive the imprint, the energetic imprint of that, and your body receives positive energy from that. But you have to be conscious in the moment to do that. How about people? How many of us take some of the people in our lives for granted? Family. Yeah, the person sitting next to us. I left here, I told you 2 weeks ago, I was at home in California to do memorial service for my dad. I no sooner was here, I was here last Sunday, got home Sunday evening, received a call that my brother, who was in California that I hugged and kissed goodbye, had experienced a brain aneurysm, was in the emergency room. Fortunately, he had a surgery and he's recovering slow, but he's on the mend. My point is, when I said goodbye to him, I thought I'd see him again. People in our lives. How about some of the other people in our lives? Nurses, first responders, our doctors, teachers, farmers. When you ate your breakfast this morning, did you take it for granted? Just stop, just and think about the farmers whose energy you're eating by eating that food. You're experiencing something they did for you. The sun, the rain, the energy, everything that came into that apple or that grapefruit you had this morning. That's a blessing. But we live so unconscious of most of it. How about trash collectors? Seriously, we take them for granted. So the next time you see the trash collectors go by, run out and give them a handshake. Say, thank you. Thank you. How about this one? How about your church, your minister? We take a lot of things for granted. Things for granted. was the last time you gave thanks for the battery that was in your car that started it this morning? See, the gift, the things that we take for granted can go on and on and on and on. So here's the key to move from simply living with gratitude to living with an awareness of how much that we take for granted and turn it into the experience of claiming our divine heritage. You ready? Here it is. Reverence is the key to not taking things for granted. What is reverence? Looking past the thing, the shell, and seeing the sacred and blessing it. See, to take anything for granted is to really throw gratitude under the bus, and in that moment we miss the exquisite sweetness that comes excuse me, from not having a full awareness of the finite, limited amount of time we have on this planet. When we begin to live with reverence, we connect the dots, and everything becomes a sacred experience. Everything becomes a sacred experience. Now, last week, the takeaway, remember I told you what the takeaway was last week? The takeaway was, if you're not as close to God as you once were, who moved? Here's the takeaway today. I want to read you the quote on reverence. This is by Rabbi Harold Kushner. I forgot to do it last service. Can you see the holiness in those things you take for granted? A paved road or a washing machine? If you concentrate on finding what's good in every situation, you'll discover that your life will suddenly be filled with gratitude, a feeling that nurtures the soul. So here's the takeaway for today's lesson. It is the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Now. Now. Not one day when we depart to the hereafter, because when we get there we're going to discover that's not where hereafter. It is the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom now. And as a matter of fact, the kingdom has already been given to you. But we have to rise above that second son syndrome and become aware of the blessings that sit in front of us every moment of every day. To go beyond gratitude is to walk a sacred earth with each step through the day, with each breath, with each thought, with each moment. To realize that thought, that step, that breath, that person, that experience, that thing is your divine inheritance. But you have to be present with it to see it and accept it. See, the prodigal son is our story. The prodigal son is our moment of redemption, of coming back home. The prodigal son is the practice of remembering the way home. Remembering the way home. And the way home is to that place you never, ever really left. It is your oneness with God. It's a matter of remembering, coming back home, accepting the gift, the precious gift of life in this moment as it is, and say, thank you, God. Thank you. This is the story of the prodigal son. You are it, I am it, we is it, and so it is.